muted and your video off while we're in the session. If you do need to ask a question, please use the chat function. You can do that by clicking on show conversation, and you can type your questions in there. I'll then read out the questions to whoever's presenting at the time. I'll now pass over to Hugh Kelly, who will introduce our guests.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third week of our Thursday night Q&A and training session. Tonight, we've got three guests in tonight. The first one is Bryan Suckling. Bryan is normally a commander in District 20, but he's also on a secondment for 12 months in the planned burning commander's role for this area in District 15. He also is part of the regional pandemic team. So Bryan has joined us tonight. Also like to welcome Chris Bull. Chris is from the wellbeing team. Chris works from the whole of the North West region, from Eltham to Point Cook and right up to Mildura, supporting the 4 districts. And their third guest is Adam Damen. Adam is works for DELP. He is in an aviation role for DELP, but he's also a volunteer in the Macedon Ranges. So before we go any further, I'd just like to do acknowledgement to country. So the City of Greater Bendigo is on Dja Dja Wurrung country, whose ancestors and descendants are the traditional owners of this country. We'd like to acknowledge their living culture and unique role in this life and in the region. So welcome everyone again. Thanks for coming on board tonight. The first week was a training Q&A. Last week we did some structural firefighting and had a interesting overview from Luke Waterson. So tonight we thought, with COVID-19 being prominent and has been with us from March, and as of last Thursday or Friday, the Chief Officer and CEO said that we need to plan for it to be with us for 12 months. It's a major part of what we do in our normal lives, and it also is affecting our volunteering with CFA as well. So we thought it would be timely to try and have a chat about COVID-19, find out a little bit about what the pandemic management team does. Chris tonight to have a chat and discuss about what his role is in wellbeing, also how we can support people with mental health issues, etc., etc. So at this stage, as I said, as Michelle also explained, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for Q&As, and if you could raise your hand. So at this stage, I'll pass over to Bryan. Thank you. Oh, and also, Bryan, if you could give us just a little bit of a rundown of yourself and roles that you've played within CFA.
Sure thing. Thanks, Huey, and thanks very much for inviting me tonight. As some of you be aware, it's been about 6 years since I was working in District 2, and I still miss District 2, so it's good to see some familiar faces already. As Huey said, my normal substantive role is in District 20 as a catchment officer in the Loddon catchment, just up the road, and we do often work together or hand in hand with District 2. Certainly with reform and everything else that's going on at the moment, it's a bit difficult to keep track of exactly what hat I should be wearing at the moment. But as Huey said, I am currently on secondment doing with the Safer Together team, doing work in the planned burning space, which of course has been a little bit challenging to deliver any planned burns in and around Bendigo in particular, in the current environment too. So I'd like to say I'm twiddling my thumbs, but I'm busier than ever. It seems when you've got a bit of spare time, people load you up with lots of things. One of those is working with the regional pandemic team. So we're reporting into the state pandemic team twice weekly, and just keeping up to speed with that ever-changing environment. We'll probably touch on a few of those things tonight, and certainly as mentioned, if you've got any specific questions, pop them into the chat room and I'm more than happy to provide the best answer that I possibly can. I reckon, would you like me to speak more now about how the pandemic teams structured, or we'll leave that for a bit later in the discussion?
No, if you can, that'd be great, Bryan. Yeah.
Sure thing. So some of you may not be aware there's a whole incident management team behind this at state level, and they are rotating every week. There's 2 different teams at the moment, so doing an enormous amount of work, as you can well appreciate. There's with the ever-changing environment, there's just a constant need to be adapting the way that we deliver our services. Probably the hardest working lot in the team, I would say, is probably the logistics function. Every time the rules change, there's a whole bunch of new stuff they've got to order, and they're exceptionally good at anticipating where the state might go. So all those masks and hand sanitizers and all the extra equipment that you've been receiving is all coordinated through them. And of course, your hardworking catchment teams work hand in hand with them. So awful lot of work goes on. The regional teams, we also have a smaller team set up to report into them. So it's the same as any of our normal command structures. We report into them and then disseminate any relevant information. There's an awful lot of information that comes out from state, and we do try to filter that down to the relevant things. I could probably talk, we came from a meeting this afternoon. There's some things hot off the press that you might appreciate knowing about. One of them is, one of the hot topics has been around requirements for crew safety going into the season for pre-season preparedness. I understand a lot of brigades in District 2 have already started doing their burnover. So the Chief is going to be providing some guidance around that very soon, possibly in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So that may not be relevant to some of your brigades who've already ticked that box, but again, the logistics team are working frantically to try and make sure that any of those structured procedures that the Chief will allude to have the relevant sanitisers, masks, and all the rest of the things that we're going to need to achieve some of that burnover drill in the COVID restrictions. So watch this space for that one. I anticipate maybe the first week of September. Sorry, Michelle, I'm just reading your thing. So Michelle's just said in the chat, please turn off your videos to help see our presenters, for those of you who can't see it. Yes, so the chief will be giving us some information there on what he expects for burnover and hazardous trees. Some more information that's another hot topic at the moment is, and particularly for me, planned burning, whether will we or won't we. State level, we've provided some guidance from the bushfire team around decision making for that. Obviously, everything we're doing needs to be associated to some sort of risk assessment. The health and well-being of our people, as always, is the highest priority. So anything that's going to expose them to any risk, whether it's COVID or fire or risk of fire, we need to think about how we best manage that. So that's what that's structured around. I don't expect that many regions are going to be supporting planned burning for the spring season during COVID restrictions, but we'll see. And of course, if there is a risk to a community that we need to address, and the only way to do that is with burning, there'll be some consideration given to that. But there'll be further advice on that forthcoming. I don't know if there's much more I can add at this stage. I would like to say around COVID stuff, if you have any questions specifically, if you're uncertain about any procedures, step one is look on the CFA intranet. There's a dedicated page there for any advice on coronavirus, and it's actually fairly extensive. So if you're uncertain about something, look it up there first. Then if you can't find the answer, speak to your catchment team or email the Northwest COVID team and we'll provide further guidance. Most of it is common sense, and I hate to say those sort of things. Everything we do is common sense. We apply if we try and think, well, how am I going to best protect myself and my team and the community? If that means I've got to put on a mask at this stage, or gloves, or clean my equipment afterwards, well, if it makes sense, let's go and do it. So let's not go to extremes, but those procedures are all outlined with a common sense approach, with our health and wellbeing in mind. All right, so I've probably spoken long enough, Huey.
Good. I've just got a question, Bryan. Which agencies are involved at a regional level that you're sort of working with over the week that you're on the pandemic team?
Yeah, good question. And it does tend to be as required. So there's mostly it's CFA people. There's 3 of us meet daily to discuss what's going on, but sometimes we will just get subject matter experts in depending on what the topic is. So sometimes at regional level, there's discussions going on all the time with VicPol and with DELP and our other, and of course DHHS are the main players in this, so they're providing most of the guidance, and they are fairly overwhelmed at the moment, so sometimes they don't make it to those meetings, but they certainly provide us with the relevant sort of guidance that we need to distribute.
Good. Just another one. With the little incident management teams that are set up at various locations, one down at Colac, and then they disperse, head on to one, and then create another one. Is DHHS, are they the incident controller if they have a little ICC up and running?
Yeah, that's right. So under the Emergency Management Act, that is their responsibility, these pandemic outbreaks. So they are responsible to be the controllers, the control agency for this. And obviously DHHS don't have to do this very often. So they have called upon CFA and other agencies to provide some help in how those IMTs are set up and run. Probably locally, the closest one for us was the KR Castlemaine. We had an IMT set up there. There was a number of District 2 staff were involved with that. And obviously a lot of agencies are involved too. So all under the guidance of DHHS and meeting state government requirements.
All right. Thanks, Bryan. At this stage, there hasn't been any questions come into the chat. So I might just see if Chris Bull is online. And if Chris could... once he comes on, if you could give a little bit of background about what your role is and who you support. As I said, we've got Adam Damen as a guest tonight. He's going to run through a small PowerPoint presentation about responding to incidents. And between myself, Chris, and Bryan, we'll have a chat about some of the things we think about or should think about when we should be when we're responding to a fire call or an incident in and under COVID-19.
Thanks, Hugh. Good evening, everybody. I work for the organisational wellbeing team. We're based out of headquarters, but I'm embedded in the northwest region. Most of you I have seen at different stages, different functions over the last 5 years I've been in the region. There is a team. Our approach has been very much this year guided by what I consider to be the 3 most concerning issues, and that's around the fire season we had that ended, and we went straight into COVID, and we had FRV as well, and there's more still to come. So later on this evening, one of the slides is around wellbeing issues as part of the presentation. I'll talk more about that there, but this is a year that will cause, for some people, a great deal of stress, for others a little bit of stress, and some of you will walk through it unscathed. But let's talk about it in more detail later. The wellbeing team is very much geared around what we need to do to support our people through this season. Staff and volunteers, it doesn't matter who it is, we're all in this together. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Hugh?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just quickly, Chris, is your team a regional team, or have you got people based in each district?
We're region. There's one of wellbeing advisors in each region. I've got the northwest. There's then another 4 or 5 staff at headquarters. One works specifically with setting up the member assistance program. Some of you will be aware of that. It's 1-800 number you ring if you need help with a psychologist or access to support. Other 2 people are involved with setting up the mental health training that CFA has decided we need to do. So that's mental health first aid and the working mind for first responders. That'll be rolled out across district and brigade leaders over the next 18 months. That's been funded. So I'm looking forward to getting that out. My goal is to get it out to the groups and then into brigade management teams in clusters as we need to go. Cluster's probably a bad word this year with COVID, but we'll work on a COVID-free cluster.
Yeah, COVID-free.
Oh yeah, we've got to do something serious.
Yes.
My language has been taken off me. The other part is, I guess, monitoring what's going on. FRB had a massive impact on a number of people in different ways. So it is around, we've still got another 4 or 5 months to go. So we're just mindful of there's still a few more staff who may well be transferred across under Section 103. So it's about what CFA is going to look like and how people are affected by that. So we're both responding to the immediate need now, Hugh, but also looking at what we have to do in the next 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, Chris, over the last 18 months just working, or 20 months I've been here full-time, working with you, would you say that the last, if we wind back 6 or 7 months ago, we had pretty extraordinary fire conditions. From that, we had a fair bit of, that was November through until at least February. There was the flow-on effect. Then we went into fire service reform, and especially with the integrated stations becoming de-integrated, and now into COVID, starting in approximately March and continuing on now. And as you well know, the Chief and the CEO said, prepare for the next 12 months. It's going to be with us for 12 months. Probably would it be extraordinary times that you've seen in your role over the last 6 or 7 months, all of this wound up together?
I don't think I've seen a year like this in like 50 years in the workforce. I've been through a couple of recessions before and downturns. I've worked in rural areas through all those. I guess the anxiety that I've got is around what will happen to people's employment, because some people, this current lockdown in Melbourne where I am, there are shops that are closed that won't reopen. There are people who are not going to be able to get back into a job, and the funding from government will run out soon. So we've got some crunch points coming, and there are some rural areas, some of the towns that'll be more badly affected than others. Some of the bigger cities like Bendigo may be able to absorb something, but it may not necessarily be across the board. There could be suburbs within Bendigo that are worse affected than others. So that whole problematic space for me, I think we're looking at an 18 months to 2 year minimum recovery from the effect that this year has had, particularly driven by COVID in terms of employment. Some of you may have noticed today the stats Beyond Blue has a big mental health support program. 75% of all referrals in the last month have come from Victoria nationwide. The number of people seeking to move to Queensland has gone through the roof. So Victoria's gone from being the fastest growing state to probably the fastest emptying state at the moment.
Yes.
We just got to get out. So there's a whole lot of those sorts of factors that are playing on people's minds. This is what I wanted to talk about later in that session, but I think we're going to have people responding to a pager this year. And I say this at the outset, I worry about people's mental state when the pager goes off and you respond and you get down to the station, you get on a truck. Where's your head at? What state are you in? Where are your stress levels? Because that whole risk assessment, that risk analysis relies on you being able to stay calm, follow your training, do what you have to do. And if you're distracted by what's happening at home or in your own life, it's an increased level of risk. So we're going to look at that in more detail later. But that Huey is where I think it's at. So I just see we're at the beginning. This year's a year from hell. But I actually think it's the beginning of what will be a 2 or 3 difficult year process.
Yeah, look forward to hearing it. Just got a raised hand, which is Bryan.
Yeah, thanks, Huey. Chris, I don't mind sharing. You and I have had some great discussions, and I've admitted to having a full plate at times. I just wanted a bit of a Dorothy Dix question, but the member assistance program, have you been overrun? And what sort of personnel do you have in place to meet the needs of these times?
Okay. Member assistance program is set up with two key agencies. The lead agency is a mob called Carinish. They're based in Melbourne. And the second agency is Decor. They're both specialist counselling and personal support agencies. They've got counsellors across the state. So if I've got, as I have had, members from isolated rural communities, there's a team, for example, of half a dozen psychologists based at Port, which gives us great space or access in that Mallee Wimmera region. People will get access to a counsellor if they need it. We had 3 men disclose historic child sex abuse. As a consequence of the Royal Commission, we were able to get specialist counsellors for them, and these are guys in their 50s and 70s. So they had a lot of questions that their partners or wives may have had over their marriages, and were answered. And so that kind of MAP is an all-encompassing service. It gives people a lot of resources and a lot of support at critical moments. This year is causing some people to think about, if their jobs go, will they have to retire early? So MAP is there for people to use when they desperately are unwell. They also can use it when they just want to sound out what they're feeling. They may be off colour, just mentally off colour. And you just need someone to talk to that's neutral on the outside and help you work through where you're stuck. Counselling is not laying on a couch and having someone try and read your brain cells. There'll be some people in this room who've used counselling before who know what I'm talking about. It's actually about helping you clear the fog. It's a really useful tool. The other part of it is if you need, if it's clinical depression or anxiety, then yes, it's access into psychiatrists if need be, or people who can prescribe medication to assist if that's what you need. And that won't be for everybody, it's only for a few. The other part with MAP, for those of you that are brigade leaders or managers in different roles, there's a manager assist component within MAP. You ring up and just talk about where you're stuck with a particular person in your brigade or your team, and they can help give you some strategies about how you might manage that situation. Homicide is not an option, just as a reminder. So we need to sort of work through a range of different supports and resources that are there. A lot of you would know Norm Bowen. The peer program exists as well. That's part of organisation wellbeing. Chaplains are also a part of it. So we had a couple of suicides in the last couple of weeks in the northeast, and the chaplains were involved there because that was the first choice for the brigade captain. He was close to the chaplain for the member who passed away. So it'll be what services you need. We don't go and tell you what you should have. We'll ask you what you want, and then we'll work out with you how best to get it. Okay.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, Chris. As we work through the presentation, yourself, Bryan, will be having input. So at the moment, I'd like to introduce Adam Damen. So Adam's been good enough to come on tonight to talk about responding to incidents and things that we should be thinking about. Just a little bit of background. 4 weeks ago, Michelle and I had a bit of a chat one day, and how we come to here is we said, what can we do to provide some training or some presenters to try and upskill the Fortuna group. Michelle also looks after Whipstick. So we thought, oh, what about a training session for an hour a week? Adam was presenting to his brigade, so I jumped on after another meeting, and it went off really well. The de-integrated brigades were meeting twice a week. and we thought we'd combine what they do there and what Adam did with his home brigade to come up with this 8 to 10 week program, which is starting to roll through. So I'd like to welcome Adam, and Adam, if you can just give the people online a little bit of background information, especially around your work role in aviation and also volunteering. Thank you.
Go off mute, Adam. You're on mute.
There we go. Second time lucky. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Adam Damen. So I'm currently the second lieutenant with Mount Macedon Fire Brigade. I've been a member of CFA for just over 20 years now. Started my journey at Bull and Adam Fire Brigade down the road, and finally moved up to Mount Macedon. I also work for Forest Fire Management Victoria as a bit of a kind of just an interlude into what Hugh was saying, and I'm the I suppose technical expert for field technologies, with a fair bit of a focus on aviation. So I look after a number of specialist programs for, I suppose, CFA and forest fire management around data gathering from aircraft. Tonight, I'm going to do a little bit of a session on, I suppose, considerations responding to incidents, something I did with my brigade a few weeks ago as we kind of entered into this second phase of the lockdown. It's something organisationally we kind of overlook a lot when we onboard new members. You know, we kind of go through our minimum skills training. We throw a pager and some turnout gear and, you know, key to the fire station over, and away we go. But we don't really sit down and think about working with our newer members and even some of our other members, just to kind of polish up how we respond and the considerations we should do before and during you know, our response, to make sure that we're in the right frame of mind or up to the job as we go. So let me just share my screen. No, wrong one. Bear with me for a second. Let's go with that one. Here we go. So yeah, responding to incidents. So just kind of go through what I go through with our new members and something we're refreshed and with a bit of a COVID, I suppose, flavour on it for tonight. So we go through understanding pager messages. So, you know, what are we looking at in our messages, job types, etc. Brigade assignment areas. For a lot of our members in Mount Macedon, it's something that they don't really understand a lot when they join up. It's just, you know, it's just seen as something that exists. You know, primary versus support calls, what does that actually mean, you know, for our response, and also around our crewing, especially with COVID. Do we all need to turn up to the fire station for that support call, or, you know, what are ways we can mitigate that and reduce, I suppose, you know, members responding to the station to make sure we still get the truck out, but, you know, we're managing, I suppose, the additional risk we all carry now. Personal considerations when we're responding, and so we'll open that up as a bit of a panel discussion with Chris, Bryan and Hugh, and gents, feel free to chime in whenever you need to. Then have a look at crew roles and responsibilities, you know, especially with limited crew now on appliances. You know, we're not responding with full complements. You know, how do we look at that and make sure we've got a good mix, and manage that. We'll talk about code 1 versus code 3 and a bit of size up, and we'll see where we get to tonight with that. You know, some of this stuff we just might touch on. A quick slide just for everyone to get on the same page. You know, another thing we don't talk a lot about is call taking and dispatch and how that actually works. We just assume people know how O calls get through to CFA and how do we get responded to jobs. We don't really cover that in a lot of detail. It's one of those things that is, you know, provided by osmosis through experienced members down, through mentoring and just being around fire stations and working within CFA. But ultimately, you know, there's two ways into call taking and dispatch for a member of the public. So mobile phone, which is handled by a centralised call centre that Telstra manage before being passed on to ESTA. Or if you come in on a landline phone, you go straight in, the call's forwarded straight to your call taker at ESTA. And it's really important to understand that, I suppose, process, so that for Joe Public that's calling in a job, if they're on their mobile phone, they have to provide their location to the Telstra call centre so that Telstra can route that call to the right jurisdiction. So we're quite lucky in Victoria. You know, we have a single call taking and dispatch service for the whole state. That's not necessarily the case in other parts of the country. So it could go to a specific agency, specific regional call centre. So Telstra actually have a big role to play in the routing of those initial 000 calls. And then call taking is split into two functions within ESTA. So the call taker, that's the public interface, and then the dispatcher, and that's who we deal with. So it's, for any of you that have done a tour of ESTA, it's two different work functions within, you know, within each emergency service. And some of the call taker and dispatchers share that role depending on the load, or they're two distinct operators. So the call's passed over, and then we interact with the dispatcher via our radio network and pages. Worth noting, that whole time takes 45 to 60 seconds before the pager goes off from the time someone calls in. So it's pretty fast. And as soon as the call taker can ascertain the location and the assistance required, that's when we're notified, which is a reason why we don't always have all the information we need for a job, and further information is provided. So that's just a kind of a high level overview of call taking and dispatch, just to kind of set the scene around responding. So, you know, sometimes why do we go to places that are not, you know, are not where the job is? A lot of it's to do with the mobile phone coverage. You think about, you've got no phone coverage, you drive past the job, you get some phone coverage, you make the call, you call it in. At some point, someone's going to ask you where the job was. A lot of people will tell where they are right then and there on the phone. They won't actually tell you where the job was. They'll tell you where they are, which is why, you know, jobs on freeways and stuff, especially down our way, we get a lot of bum steers on which side of, you know, overpasses things are on, because there's quite a lot of broken phone coverage around. Quick refresh on pager messages while we go. This all sets the scene for responding. You know, what are we responding to? You know, we take it for granted that people kind of know that the tone goes off, you go to the fire, you know, the respond to the fire station. I mean, I started in CFA when we were on tone pages, before we had, you know, alphanumeric stuff. And, you know, that was easy. Yet the page just said go or no go. So you didn't know what you were going to until you got there. But now we have more information at our fingertips, and we can pick, you know, kind of look at the job and pick and choose whether or not we need to respond to that, or if we want to, more importantly. And it's a really important thing. You know, through my volunteer career, you know, I've worked with a number of members that will upfront talk about jobs they will not respond to as part of, you know, their limitations. So Lieutenant I used to work closely with at Bull and Adam. Motor vehicle accidents were not his forte, so he wouldn't go. So we knew that we weren't going to get a response from, you know, our first lieutenant and a couple other members to MVAs or incidents that involved rescue type work, and that's perfectly fine. But it's I suppose knowing your own limitations, which are really important in that space. Just because we volunteer does not mean we have to respond to everything. You know, we sign up in good faith to the organisation, generally to fight fire, and there's a whole raft of other things the organisation does that, you know, we discover along the way, and we can choose not to participate in all facets of the organisation. So really important piece of advice for, you know, newer members as they come on board, that we need to get out there. I'll go around it quickly. So you've got your brigade area, where you're responding to, your job type, your suggested response code, a description of the address, closest street. So something we normally overlook is street corner information on pager messages. If I, normally talk to brigade members about interpreting pager messages, the street corner thing is the one that's always kind of lost. So it always has the closest street corner or intersection, and sometimes if you've got two options, it will give you the second closest, indicated by the slashes. 1/ for the closest, 2/ for the next best option. So it allows you to position that in a map book or whatever quite quickly. I know we've moved on from technology, but we can't always rely on it. So for those of you that use BART, sometimes BART will throw you a big curveball on where it thinks the job is. I think the best one we had was had a job in Mount Macedon, and it put it in WA. And it was great to see on the BART display in the fire station that the drive time was 6 days and 13 hours to respond. So we just got to be careful when we leverage that kind of technology. The pager is the primary alerting tool we have, and it has all the information we need on it to kind of fall back to paper maps and, kind of mapping and navigation. Also tells us who else is coming, so it'll tell us what services. So if there's fire, police and ambulance, you'll have the letters for that, as well as co-responding brigades, also the rescue unit if the SES are involved, and then you get your fire number, which is in a code of year, month and job number. So just to kind of break down some of those kind of things that are there all the time, but we don't necessarily talk about.
Adam, if I could just chime in there.
Yeah, jump in, Bryan.
And probably importantly for your role with DELP, important one that we often don't look at on our pager is that last little bit of information about who's been responded, and that's the aircraft. So more often than not, we get brigades saying, has the aircraft been responded to this, when we're talking predetermined dispatch, and more often than not, that information is on the pager already for you to see.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting too that if the aircraft, the pager will tell you if the aircraft has been alerted. It doesn't necessarily tell you that it will be going to your job. So if the aircraft's already tied up on another job, or you're the second job in the queue and it's accepting the first job, it will still have that the Air Bendigo is coming, but you may not actually have it airborne. So sometimes it is worth checking if you don't hear it come up on air with Vic Fire to respond. So they do respond like an appliance, so they will turn out with Vic Fire to effectively confirm that they're responding, and they'll also say which job they're responding to if they've been paged to multiple jobs. So that's worth keeping in mind too. So just keep your ear out for that. Ultimately, the aircraft's still 5 to 8 minutes from the pager message till it's airborne. So you should be, in the station or close to responding yourselves in most cases, so that you should hear the aircraft come up, and the aircraft will be looking for that fire ground channel as well, so that they can communicate directly with the first responding appliances to coordinate operations. So I think this is something, it's a never-ending kind of reminder down our way, is that pagers are still the primary alerting method for the brigade. So, we all fall into the trap of BART will give us a chop out. BART is good, but it doesn't have guaranteed service. So the pager network has a quality of service. It's a known quantity. It's heavily monitored. It's got redundancy, and it's got better coverage than the mobile network. They're all the things BART doesn't have. So BART is an app. It runs on your phone. It needs a data connection if the cell tower's a bit jammed up, or your phone's stuck on your NBN Wi-Fi connection at home and you've got an internet outage. You may miss calls, or they may come late. So just remember that. BART is a great tool for situational awareness and coordination, and I think has a bit of a part to play over the next few months in, allowing us to make better decisions to reduce our kind of operational risk around COVID. But, for brigades that use BART, yeah, it is still a secondary system. So, and it'll be the same with the supplementary alerting system when that comes on board. It'll have some efficiencies because it's better integrated into the paging network as well as CFA systems, but it will still be treated as a secondary platform for alerting, just because of the fact that we can't guarantee that your mobile phone's got data at the time when the call goes out. Quick recap of event types that we see on the pager. So remote monitor, alarms, grass and scrub, incidents. There's also some ones in here that we don't see very often. So non-structure, non-structure fire and rescue, which I don't think I've ever seen come up on my pager as a job, but is listed in the CFA's Ops Comms manual as a potential job type. Rescue. I thought there was 2 sheets of that. Go back. Yeah, there we go. Structure fire, trench rescue, confined space rescue, structural collapse, mine collapse, and high angle rescue. So they're the approved CAD codes that will potentially come up on your pager message. So a few more there than the basic kind of bread and butter ones that we generally see around structure, non-structure, and grass and scrub and rescue. So there are a few more hidden categories that are very rare. But really important to understand that there are all these categories, because that kind of builds into that personal preparedness and suitability to respond to jobs. Quick clarification and recap of support calls. So any incident that's located outside of brigade assignment area, brigades 1 truck to a support call. We see down our neck of the woods a bit, brigades try and sneak out a second support appliance. Probably a little bit different now with COVID and reduced crewing. Maybe a potential to follow up with additional support if it's a going job, but it's one of those things that needs to be monitored to see if you need additional resources on the fire ground or not. And then if you are asked for an additional appliance, that should come through ESTA. It shouldn't come through, I suppose, local arrangements and phone calls. So it should be following the CAD escalation tables. And we all know what a primary call is, so I won't touch on that too long based on the time. And this is the bit we really wanted to talk about tonight, which is personal considerations. There's some questions posed here. And I think the 2 photos here are 2 jobs we've had during, I suppose, the last few months in COVID. And one of the things as the crew leader on the first responding truck that I've had to deal with is how to maintain social distancing on the fire ground. It's really hard. It's we're like herding cats some days of the week. We're all ingrained in how we operate and work together as a crew, and to now try and reduce risk and space ourselves out is actually a challenge that you have to have in the forefront of your mind when you start managing jobs, and how we can just separate ourselves and try and, I suppose, adhere to all the policies and procedures and guidelines that are coming out, from the Department of Health and through CFA. And so there is some big changes in the way, we've had to operate, and we don't get many calls to practice this either. So, we've had a couple of calls that had potential in the last few months, and we've kind of dodged a few bullets on protracted incidents as well. So, it's one of those interesting things, and I'll hand over, if you like, to you, Hugh, if you'd like to add anything here, and then over to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. It's a great question, and I would like to. The question that I would have is, how do we know that the event we're going to has has or has not got potential COVID impacts on us, and we don't. So I think in the environment we're in at the moment, in the last week, we've seen the daily numbers start to decrease. We've seen some high numbers with deaths, which is really tragic and unfortunate, but we need to really think about what we are doing when the pager goes off and when we do respond to the station. I think a real benefit at the moment across Victoria, we've got everyone wearing a mask of some description, whether it's a surgical type mask or a homemade mask. So when people are arriving at the stations now, everyone outside, or 99.9% of people are wearing a mask. So those sort of things that we need to consider as we're going there, along with size up about the job you have. Think potentially, is it a motor vehicle accident where it's unknown people in the car, considerations of whether they may be or maybe not. So we would treat everyone the same. So we'd be wearing our PPE, of course. Responding to certain nursing homes have been quite topical, just due to the fact that there are a large amount of elderly people that have been unfortunately deceased through it. So there's some extra precautions that some brigades need to take, especially around positive cases in nursing homes. So there was a guidance note that came out on Friday for affected 3 or 4 brigades in District 2, some extra PPC about responding to nursing homes with positive cases. So what about yourself, Bryan? What's some things that you'd be thinking about when we're responding to a call around COVID?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. It really is about the risk, and we weigh, as with any job, we weigh up the risk. We're constantly doing a size up. COVID just adds another layer, another consideration, if you like. So once we arrive at the station, we're slipping into COVID mode, if you like, COVID response mode. So we're doing our taking our temperature, we're changing into a surgical mask while we ride in the truck. We're doing our size up as we go, saying, right, what's the risk? What are we dealing with? What's the highest risk to life and property that we're going to have to deal with? How are we going to keep our people safe and the community safe? And I say this to my kids, none of us have showing any symptoms, but if we treat ourselves like we are constantly contagious. So it's not about worrying about whether we're going to catch it from other people. It's worrying about, am I actually going to give something to somebody else? So if we put a safety circle around ourselves when we respond like that, we are going to be protecting our comrades and our community at the same time. So I think there's an awful, as I said earlier, an awful lot of procedures to keep in mind, but if we keep it simple and just make sure that we do our best to minimise that risk of exposure, then I think we're ahead of the game.
What about yourself, Chris? What's some things that you mentioned earlier about a motor vehicle accident, and it might have been Adam might have mentioned that. What about from your side, wellbeing?
The starting point for me is just what Bryan was saying. I went through the AIDS era in the 80s with youth work in residential care, and we had to assume that every kid was potentially infectious with the HIV, Hep B, Hep C, whatever it was. So if you treat everyone as a potential risk and you then may get infected and become a carrier yourself, it's the safety measure. It's what you do now and what you're trained to do in brigade. So when you are taught how to roll out a hose or fit a branch or whatever it may be, you actually are learning skills that are about your safety as well as getting a job done. So think COVID in the same context. What do I need to do? What equipment should I have? How should I prepare myself? If I have to handle someone because it's an emergency situation, how do I then, what hygiene practices do I follow back at the station to get myself clean or get the equipment cleaned or whatever it may be? So put yourself into that safety mode and get it's a risk assessment of what do I need to do here? Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right training? Ask yourself that. I think Adam before mentioned a really important part when he was at a previous brigade. there will be some people amongst us tonight and some people in your brigades who are quite anxious about contracting COVID for a whole lot of reasons. If you're not comfortable getting on the truck, don't go. What I would encourage all of you to do is to have the conversations at the brigades in a peaceful environment beforehand. This is part of your pre-season planning. And you can do this online, you can do it telephone tree, whatever you need to do amongst yourselves, amongst your members. How many of you are comfortable turning out to, for example, a house fire or where there's going to be people? Tell us now. If COVID's going to put you off, we need to know so we know who's going to be available when the pager goes off. See, that's part of your planning as I see it. And this is where the honesty and the integrity come into it for you as a member. If you're not comfortable and you're unsure, or you might have someone at home in your own household who's compromised physically and therefore will be more vulnerable if you bring COVID-19 home. So in my case, my mother's 93 down in Geelong. If I was able to see her, I wouldn't be going there at the moment because I live in a high-risk area in Melbourne. It's the chance of taking it to her. So it's that kind of planning for yourselves. Be mindful of what you've got at home. Is there a risk factor at home, either to give it to you or to contract it from you? If you're going to go to a job where you may contract it, what are you going to take home? So think about those sorts of steps. That then guides you in how you conduct yourself at a turnout. I think Hugh was saying before about practicing social distancing. There will be times when it's just not going to be possible. But where you can, be mindful of it. It starts to get in your own thinking now. We are all learning a new way of behaving wearing masks. We are all learning about how we treat it in the supermarkets. We don't brush up against someone else. We try and give that metre and a half space. I was reading about some of the stuff that went through the Spanish flu era and how many masks were compulsory. It was a criminal act not to wear a mask in parts of Australia. And people really did get into a routine of doing things because that was what was required. We're doing the same thing in Victoria again now. We are the guinea pig for Australia in some ways. We will see our behaviour change, and you as brigade members are going to be right in this. The other part of it for me is if you've got members who are seriously under the pump with family pressures, as a consequence of what's happening at the moment with the lockdown, whether the economic side of it or the relationship side of it, a lot of you will have members in yourselves where you've got kids at school, and the kids at the moment are copping it fairly tough at school, especially those in year 12. This is a year from hell for our VCE students. So I'm very mindful of if you've got pressures at home and you're distracted and you're thinking about something else, that's an increased risk for you in terms of distraction and concentration on the job. Please be mindful of where your head's at. And if you're not in the right space to respond, have the courtesy to say to your captain or whatever and pass this message on, I'm not right for tonight, I can't do it. You know, there's no skin off anyone's nose. I'd rather you be upfront about it than put yourself at risk or the other members of the crew at risk. We want you in one piece. We want everybody else to come home safe as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bryan, you had your raised hand. You've got something to add?
Yeah, Hugh, and having not played in District 2 for a little while, I'm just curious whether or not there's been some discussions amongst Fortuna Group, for example, about running shifts where you've got the luxury of having a lot of people, a lot of members in your brigade. Has there been any discussion around consideration for, well, these people are going to respond between 8 and 5 on Monday, and these people are B shift for Monday night sort of thing? And that's has that been a discussion point?
Yeah, there was. Back probably in March, there was some discussions. We left it up to the brigades to manage themselves, and similarly around the appliance checking. Every fortnight is a minimum, but some brigades elected to have just one individual person to do it on a sort of fortnightly basis, or if the truck went out the door, they would check it. The busier brigades, of course, in closer to Bendigo, are going to sort of 200 calls a year. So the encouragement has been from the leaders of the brigades, and that every time the truck's out is to do a check just before it's put back in, and basically their 2 week starts again. A little bit different question came up last night around FCVs, and at the moment, modern cars, DMOs, and talking to your motor mechanics, etc. And the DMO said that once a month would be fine at this time of the year, unless there's a battery issue or something like that. But brigades locally, I'm unsure of any that are actually running any shifts, but I know that they have discussed it. Another good thing that brigades are doing is looking at whether we do need that second appliance, as Adam spoke about, when we would normally have sent an FCV or another vehicle. It's a support call, and something that's taken a bit for people is if they miss the first truck, is not to hang around at the station. Those sort of things. We're nearly 6 months into it since March. We're in stage 3. We're getting well versed at that. But initially, back at the beginning, it was hard for people not to attend, especially on a Sunday morning. Maybe training was one night a week. That was normal. Now we've gone back to very limited training, except for online. So, yeah, as I said, and the further we go out, some brigades have been lucky not to have no activity. And, of course, I said last night also, the training environment. We've lost the last 6 months for training, and I'm sure when we do get the opportunity to get back, people will be are definitely looking forward to it. So I see that there's some people that enjoy their time at the fire station and CFA, and it's been a bit of an impact on some of those people as well. What about Adam? What about yourself? What's some of the thinking about responding to that, the personal considerations and things?
It's an interesting one. I think, I suppose we went into the first part of the lockdown looking at, I suppose, Mount Macedon's a commuter town. Most people work in Melbourne, the dynamic shift to work from home. So I suppose we made an assumption that we would have more daytime responders available because I suppose just the fact that there was a greater presence on the Mount, and that actually didn't eventuate. We probably still have the same core group of people that are available during the day, because I suppose the working from home commitments of a lot of our members preclude them from dropping everything, walking out of meetings and stuff to respond. So it's been, I suppose, an interesting change for us to kind of manage through, as to, we kind of thought, we'll be well-resourced sport for choice, but that's not necessarily, the case. The interesting thing is, a lot of our members are looking and making more informed decisions about, okay, it's a support call. There's 4 greens on BART that live within, 4 minutes of the fire station. Will I get in the car and go? So we know our members are making kind of more considered decisions when they see that the crew requirement for the truck is met. And same with, I suppose, primary calls as well. Where we're evaluating, do we send the second appliance or not? Do we hold it and just send people back home? And some of the other things we've had to look at is, okay, how do we manage the thermometer, for instance? So it's easier for the first person to keep hold of the thermometer and temperature test everyone, then put it down, pick it back up. Because we're not, we've got to either wipe it down otherwise. So we're trying to implement some of those practical things that just make responding in the fire station a lot easier, and some of that workflow. And it is a challenge, because we're about a 75 to 80 job brigade a year. So it can be few and far between to try and iron these things out as we head towards summer. And then my considerations of Fireground is, as a second appliance, is keeping the crew on the truck until we confirm what our tasking is. So, I suppose historically we all like to get off the truck and the crew starts to kind of mingle and gravitate towards the primary appliance on scene to see what's going on. We've spent a lot of time trying to keep the crew contained to the vehicle or to stay within arm's length of the vehicle until a time that we've tasked, just so we're keeping ourselves away from our neighbouring brigades to minimise that exposure or potential exposure. So I suppose it's made us rethink a lot of our operations and how we kind of can, reduce risk, but still deliver the service we're required to. And we know that at some points that, we just have to get the job done, and social distancing for certain members of the crew goes out the door. But we try and have that conversation up front too, so that, we can rearrange who's taking on those tasks as well based on their personal circumstances. So there's a few more conversations in the truck around roles and responsibilities going on, as well as to who's comfortable doing what, depending on the job we're going to.
Very good.
All right, I'll move on to the next slide. I'm cognizant that it's nearly 8:30. Which gear? So we always have this, discussion. It's pretty easy on the mount in winter. It's structural gear to everything nearly, because it's cold and we like to stay warm. But which gear? What does that mean? For decontamination, sending gear away now. Things we have to consider. So should we be hanging the gear back on the hook after every job, or do we need to think about that? In the COVID space, it's something I'd like to see some more advice on around. What should we be doing with laundering and stuff going forward? Just because we do tend to wear our gear to lots of things, and it gets dirty and drags across stuff. But then I suppose it comes into, okay, in addition to the gear, what's the additional PPE required now? In the COVID space, and there's some really good guidance on that for confirmed COVID events or events where it's high risk, MVAs and the like. And we've pushed our members to do those online modules that have been put together by CFA, just to kind of help them better understand what PPE and when. And it's I suppose there's been some good guidance with mask wearing in the station and transition to CFA supplied equipment, which mask, what time, P2 versus BA versus surgical masks, all that stuff. So I'll flick over to Bryan now, and he can enlighten us with some more detail in this space.
Yeah, I probably can't add too much more, Adam. I think we've sort of touched on most of it, and I will direct everyone, if you haven't already done, get on to the COVID's website and have a look on the intranet. There is some really good guidance for all of this if you're not sure. And in a lot of ways, I would hate to talk and mislead you in some way about what the procedures are. But particularly for masks, we're all wearing masks when we're out and about. So when the pager goes off, we get in our car or we get on our horse cart or whatever, or bike, whatever it is, we go down to the station, we're wearing our mask. We get to the station, we are putting on a surgical mask when we're in the truck on the way to the job. Then once we've done a size up, if we need to be doing any activity, I can't remember the exact wording, but you may be required to put on a P2 mask or keep your surgical mask on, or of course put BA on. And that's about as much as I'll say about it. I would refer you to the exact procedures and highly recommend any of those online training packages. Really good thing to do with your brigade or with a group if you want to know more.
Hey, Bryan, just a quick one, Adam. One thing I've noticed with the surgical masks and some of the ones that you can purchase from the shops for home, that if you go to put them on, sometimes if you've been wearing them for a bit and you take it off to get a drink of water, sometimes when you go to put it back on, it does break. It's just for brigades to make sure that they're keeping a quantity in the truck, no different to the nitrile gloves. Of course, same as our P2s, because at some stage they do get stressed, especially if you have to take a drink of water and take it off for a quick second, and then you go to put it back on the brakes, and you might get a little bit panicky about, oh no, I haven't got my mask on. So as I said, if I'm sure brigades have got them in their all their appliances.
It's probably also worth noting that there's a top and a bottom to a surgical mask. They do actually have a little bit of wire in them to form around your nose. So it's quite easy, especially if you haven't been to the fire station due to limitations and you turn up to a job and that's the first time you've got to put the mask on. It is quite easy to put it on upside down and not realise that you haven't got that kind of nose fitted properly because the wire's at the bottom. So it's not pretty hard to identify the top and the bottom sometimes when you're pulling them out of the packet. But yeah, just worth noting that there is a top and a bottom. And I suppose reiterating, there's a whole heap of guidance notes around how to clean the truck and wipe stuff down and wipes, and just think about where you put them in your fire station. So think of your workflows. It's a struggle for us in our kind of unique fire station around entry point and where we gear up and where we can store all the gear to do the checks as close to the door as possible. But work with your officers and stuff about trying to optimize all that kind of workflow to help the flow and respond. We've put a set of wipes right beside the front or the personal access door so that we can wipe the handles and stuff as we enter and exit, and the light switches and the like. So all that stuff needs to be wiped down in addition to the trucks. So it can become quite a lot of things if you have to move through the station that you should really revisit and touch as you kind of exit the building after the job, after you've restowed the truck. So really important to follow all those procedures and kind of decontaminate appliances in the buildings. And I think that's the benefit of this kind of thing I think we'll be more aware of our potential contaminants, and that will serve us well through as an organization for reducing overall risk, because I think post this we will become more hyper vigilant around, I suppose, cleanliness of appliances and gear and stations and things as we go, and that will be a benefit, to our health going forward. The other thing is, we've looked at how do we kind of formalise some crew responsibilities during COVID. Is a fair bit taken from the structural firefighting course, but I suppose we're limited to 4 in the truck now. So what does that mean? We're kind of down that extra pair of hands. Do we have 2 BA operators on board, or have we left one behind because we're 4? So all those kind of extra considerations now. So and then the question of, if you're 3 up and you're in a crew cab, where do you sit the 3rd person? Do you sit them in the middle seat in the back so that they're even spaced between the 2 people in the front, or do you sit them on one side? So those kind of discussions. So there's there's guidance there on max numbers in vehicles, but think about how you can maximize your distance within the vehicle as well, depending on your crew configuration. And I think we'll leave it there on the presentation based on the time. So I'll hand it back over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Adam. Just getting the technology right. So, yeah, thanks for the presentation tonight. It was a really good refresher to go back to the basics, right back to the beginning, especially around the pager message and just reaffirming some of that information, having the conversation when we get there, looking at the crew dynamics, and if is the second appliance taken. Just a couple of ones back on the pager call. Sometimes we do get a pager message that comes through as a grass and scrub fire undefined. So that would mean that the call takers haven't been able to get all the information on what the fire incident would be in that 60 seconds to get the page. So the brigade will get a page and it'll come in as a grass and scrub fire undefined. And it's really the default until they can get that further information. And it may take you 4 4 to 6 minutes, or maybe even up to 10 minutes to get to the station, depending on the area you're in. In that time, they've been talking to the person that whole time, and then they can get better address or what's on fire, etc., etc. So, no, really good, great discussion. What about back to you, Chris? Anything in closing tonight? Anything you'd like to touch on or finish off on?
Just one thing, the 1800 959 232 is the number for MAP. If you need it, there's cards and posters and stuff up at most stations. It's on the CFA website. Follow the wellbeing links. There's a whole lot of tip sheets and other information, resources available. So make use of them as you need to, or you can get in touch with me via email, or I'm in the contact book, so grab a hold of that if you need to. Otherwise, thank you for allowing me to come.
Great, thanks, Chris. And what about Bryan?
Yeah, nothing further to add. Just thanks very much for having me along, and encourage everyone to have a look on that intranet site for further information on COVID stuff, particularly if you're uncertain about something.
And great, thanks, Bryan. And Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. I can't reiterate enough, look at your own circumstances before responding. So make sure you're up to the job before kind of committing to walking out the door to go to the fire station. So, it's, I suppose, a very difficult time for a lot of us, and this stuff creeps up on you. You think you're doing okay, and it's just the smallest trigger that can kind of, become overwhelming. So yeah, really take the time to look at where you're at personally, and where family is at, because we need our members to be the best they can be when for the long haul, not just the short term.
Yeah, no, great advice, Adam. So, look, again, just checking the chat. There hasn't been any questions, and now's an opportunity if anyone would like to raise a hand or pose a question to any of the panel. But again, so tonight I'd like to thank Bryan Suckling, Adam Damen, Chris Bull, and of course Michelle. Michelle is the technical guru that puts together these for me, and all I have to do is really get here and help facilitate. We're trying to look at different situations and scenarios. At this stage, we are, of course, as I alluded to on the first week for the people who have been here, we're working up towards the fire danger period. So there will be some opportunities around bushfire, grass fire tactics. In a couple of weeks' time, we've got a Q&A just with some key people in the Fortuna area from other agencies. So Forest Fire Management, Municipal Fire Prevention Officer, and a couple of other guests on that night, and that'll be around their role and what they do to support CFA and in around the fire danger period, and how they support the RDO, etc. We're going to give the group an opportunity to deliver some training sessions. We've got some people that are doing some really great work, similar to Adam, within their brigades, and so we'd love to have other people to jump on board and take the opportunity to present something that is beneficial to all. So I just saw Tony Jackson from Huntley raised his hand. Tony, you got a question?
Thanks, Hugh. Congratulations, Adam. That was a magnificent presentation. What I was asking was, is that your presentation, or is it something that the CFA has got and can distribute? Is it something that we in other brigades can use?
Oh, definitely. No, look, I put that one together myself, but I'm more than happy to share them. So that's kind of how this kind of eventuated tonight. I've kind of made all my content available to Michelle and the team to have a look at. So they picked this one up. But yeah, more than happy for that to be sent around. So I'll work with Michelle to get that to the right people.
All right, thank you very much. And just secondly, are these sessions recorded, Hugh?
Yes, Tony. Michelle started recording right on 7:30. So the idea is that if someone misses it tonight, or you would like to play it back through some brigade training or something like that, you've got the ability to do it.
Tony,
Thank
when I'll try and pop it up on YouTube via a private link, which I'll be able to share with the brigades. I will let you all know in due course when I've finished that. But yes, they all will be recorded.
Thank you. Good job, everybody.
Thanks, Tony. No other questions at this stage. Nothing. So it is quarter to 9. We always try to keep it to that hour or just a bit over. So again, like to thank the 3 guests tonight. Thank Michelle. Also like to thank, we had approximately nearly 60 people online tonight. Really appreciate people turning up and supporting us. Any feedback, greatly appreciated, good, bad or indifferent. If you've got something you'd like us to do, we've had a group officer on the first week from Whipstick, Peter, put in some suggestions, and we're looking at delivering and some of those too. So as I said, really appreciate everyone turning up on a Thursday night. Next week, it'll, at this stage, is to be announced. As I said, in the following week, it'll be a Q&A with some of our local people from different agencies. So again, thanks for coming, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you.